Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive deep into something called anxious attachment. We'll look at where it comes from, how it actually shows up in our lives, and, most importantly, how we can start to move toward more secure, fulfilling connections.
So let's kick things off with a story, one that might feel really familiar. Meet Sarah. She wants deep, loving connection more than anything. But what happens is, whenever a partner pulls back just a little, this overwhelming anxiety takes over. And that leads to this cycle of, well, clinginess and constant reassurance seeking that ironically ends up creating the very distance she's terrified of.
Does that cycle sound familiar at all? If you're nodding your head right now, you are so not alone. And here's the thing, this isn't some kind of character flaw, it's a deeply ingrained strategy for relationships, and understanding where it came from, that's the absolute first step to changing the script.
Okay, so here's the crucial thing to get. This whole pattern is not something you chose, it's a survival strategy you learned. And to really get it, we have to rewind all the way back to our very first relationships. And this brings us to attachment theory. John Bowlby's work back in the 1950s was a total game changer. He showed that we are biologically hardwired to stay close to our caregivers for safety. Not just physical safety, but emotional safety too. These early bonds literally shape our brains, creating this internal blueprint for how love is supposed to work for the rest of our lives.
So from this theory, researchers identified 4 main attachment styles. As you can see, about 60% of people end up with a secure style, feeling pretty confident in their connections. The rest of us fall into one of 3 insecure styles, which are really just different ways of adapting to the environment we grew up in.
Today, we're zeroing in on that 18%, the anxious-preoccupied style. And here's what's so fascinating. This style often doesn't come from neglect or a home without love. Nope. It usually comes from a home with a lot of inconsistency.
Okay, let's really break this down. Imagine you're a little kid. You cry out for comfort. Sometimes your parent is right there, warm, loving, totally in tune with you. But other times, maybe they're stressed, or distracted, or just unavailable. So you learn this really powerful lesson. Connection is absolutely vital, but you can't rely on it. To feel safe, you have to become hyper-aware, maybe even a little loud, just to make sure you get noticed. That becomes your strategy.
So we've got this childhood blueprint. Now, let's fast forward. How does this actually play out in our adult romantic relationships? Well, the very strategies that helped you survive as a kid can create some real struggles now. Does any of this ring a bell? That constant pit in your stomach that your partner might leave? Needing to hear "I love you" over and over just to quiet the anxiety? Maybe reading way too much into a text that just says, "Okay." That's the childhood hypervigilance still at work, constantly scanning for threats because your blueprint says connection is fragile and could disappear at any moment.
And this leads to what's often called the anxious-avoidant trap. It's this classic and, frankly, super painful dynamic. See, the anxious person tries to get closer to feel safe, while the avoidant person needs space to feel safe. So you get this push-pull, this dance where one person chases and the other retreats, and both of their deepest needs are constantly clashing.
Okay, I know this can all sound a bit heavy, but here's the good news, the really good news. This is not a life sentence about relationships. Far from it. In fact, if we flip the script and look at this differently, we can see this style comes with some pretty amazing strengths, almost like a hidden superpower. The whole key is to shift your perspective. What if this isn't a flaw, but just a difference? That same hypervigilance that causes all the anxiety? Well, when you learn to manage it, it can be channeled into an incredible gift for connection. Think about it. People with this style are often incredibly empathetic. They're tuned in, they're deeply committed. They have this huge capacity for intimacy and can pick up on subtle emotional shifts that other people might totally miss. When these skills are harnessed, these are some of the most devoted and caring partners you could ever ask for.
So these strengths are real, but they kind of need to be harnessed to really shine. How do we do that? Well, you can't go back and change your childhood, but, and this is huge, backed by all sorts of neuroscience, you absolutely can change your brain and your relationship patterns. It's called neuroplasticity, and it means your story is far from over. The journey really starts with self-awareness. It's about noticing those triggers, like when your partner needs some space, and just learning to pause before you react. It's about catching that automatic thought that screams, "They don't love me anymore," and challenging it. And crucially, it's about learning to say what you need, clearly and without blame, like, "Hey, I feel a little worried when I don't hear from you," instead of lashing out.
And this right here is the goal. It's this really powerful, hopeful concept called earned secure attachment. It means that even if your original blueprint was insecure, you can do the work, you can reflect, you can heal, and actually develop the patterns of a secure attachment style as an adult. Your past does not have to dictate your future.
So what does that healing actually look like? Well, it can be a really subtle shift in how you tell your own story. An unresolved story might sound like, I felt alone, but it made me stronger, which kind of dismisses the original pain. But an earned secure story sounds more like, I felt alone, and I can understand now that my parents were stressed and doing the best they could. See the difference? It holds both things, your pain and your empathy, at the same time.
Okay, let's bring this all back to the here and now. What does all this mean for your relationships today? How can we use this to build stronger, safer, more secure connections with the people we love?
If you're with a partner who leans anxious, listen up. Here's your pro tip. Consistency is your superpower. Simple, reliable, predictable actions build so much trust. Instead of getting frustrated by their need for reassurance, try being proactive. A quick text like, hey, I've got a crazy busy day, but I can't wait to talk to you tonight around 7, can literally prevent hours of anxiety.
And hey, for all the parents listening, I want you to take a deep breath and listen to this, because it's probably the most comforting piece of research you'll hear all day. You do not have to be a perfect parent. In fact, to build a secure bond with your child, you only need to get it right, to be attuned and responsive about 1/3 of the time.
Yeah, let that sink in. 1/3. It's not about perfection, it's about repair. It's about being present and responsive often enough that your kid builds this deep, fundamental trust that you'll be there. It's those small, everyday moments that add up and build a foundation of security that can last a lifetime.
So, at the end of the day, understanding your attachment style isn't about blaming the past. It's about empowering your future. Once you recognize the pattern, you get the power to break the cycle. You get to be the author of the next chapter. And you can write one that's filled with the safety, the connection, and the secure love you've always deserved.